Welcome to Communication, Connection, Community, the Podcaster's Podcast. This podcast takes a deep dive into modern-day communication strategies in the podcasting space. We chat with interesting people who make the podcasting and speaking spaces exciting and vibrant. We also dive into the podcasting community with news, updates, latest trends and topics from this ever-evolving space. So strap in. It's going to be one amazing ride. Let's dive into today's episode. Wow, do we ever have a lot of ground to cover today with our guest? And it's on a topic that we haven't really touched on too much, but I'm sure it will surface. It's going to come up more than once, I'm sure, over the next several episodes, select episodes for sure. And that's the topic of artificial intelligence, or as I like to call it, augmented intelligence. And my guest today has quite a bit of experience in this. His inception into AI, though, was through the publishing space. And I know there's a lot of trepidation about AI. It's going to take over the world. And I can't wait to dive into today's conversation with Dr. Bo Bennett, who has a PhD in social psychology. He currently runs over a dozen websites, has written over a dozen books, mostly on the topics of critical thinking, and teaches several online courses. He has been in the self-publishing industry for over a decade and has written multiple screenplays. And we're so glad to be talking to him today. We're going to cover a number of different topics. Bo, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So good to be here.
It's great to have you here. So let's start at the beginning. Maybe not the very beginning. We don't necessarily need to go that far back into history, but tell me where you're at right now. How did you get into the publishing world?
I got into the publishing world by creating my own book back in 2001. It was right after I sold my first business of significant value. So I put together this 740-page tome of basically success principles, ideas, business strategies called Year to Success. And I really wanted to get it out there. I had a lot of money at the time, so I kind of went through the more traditional publishing route, pitching it to major publishers, which all turned me down because they said, nobody wants to wait a year for success. Redo your book, the 7 tips, the 3 tips, and then we'll consider it. I'm like, that's not how it works though, right? So it wasn't very marketable in their view. So I had to basically go the self-publishing route, and that was a completely different industry back in 2001. So I kind of navigated it, and it was a real pain in the neck. I eventually made it and got my book out there and realized that I could definitely clean up this process for other people. And that's essentially what I did. I built a business my first business was called ebookitcom, and just helping people with ebook publishing. And then that eventually morphed into what I run today, Bookmarketingpro, which is ebook, audiobook, print book, all the publishing, the creation, and then every kind of marketing you could think about having to do with that. Plus, now we're into AI book generation as well, which is completely fascinating area and space to be in. So that's how it evolved over the past 20-something years.
It's funny how you mentioned that it's changed a lot in the last 20 some odd years, because I mean, I've known people that back in early 2000s, like you, wrote a book and became an instant success. I'm kidding. They didn't become an instant success. Tends to be, unless you, as you say, you're going the traditional publishing route, you probably have a better chance of doing that. But they've definitely said it's an extension of your business card. It's, there's all different philosophies behind it, but definitely there's been an evolution there. There's been an evolution in the world of AI. It's fascinating that with all the media out there, that people are still gravitating to the printed word. But you indicated that it's not just the printed word, because you're in the, not just the ebook world rather, but the audiobook world as well, which I thought would have gone the way of the dodo by now.
Yeah, no, definitely not. You think about how many people are active and exercise and go on hikes and go on walks. And what do? They listen to things. They take their iPhone out or their smartphone, plug in their headphones and start listening. What do they listen to? Well, a lot of times they listen to podcasts. And a lot of times they listen to audiobooks, something a little bit more structured, something a little bit more targeted, something where you're not going to get bombarded with ads and so forth. So they tend to enjoy it. Audiobooks do extremely well. Books in general are still doing extremely well.
Wait a minute, Bo, are you suggesting that we are not structured in the podcasting space here?
No, podcasting is great. Put it this way. There's so many people with a lot of attention to give that there's enough for everybody.
I'm just pulling your leg there. There's definitely a wild west still philosophy to the podcasting space, and I think we'll see some changes in that space in the next, I don't know. I gaze into my crystal ball and I say, the next 2 to 5 years, but I said that 2 to 5 years ago, and it's still a wide open playing field. So it's great to see that publishing in multiple forms is still alive and well. You did mention something though that I know when I saw your request come through to be a guest on the show that I thought, I really have to dive into this, because you've indicated off the top that one of the things that you're working on now is, if I'm understanding correctly, AI publishing. Like you're basically putting instructions into AI and it's publishing a book. Do I understand that to be that way?
Yeah, it creates the book. Imagine this. Imagine you have an idea for a book, which, let's face it, everybody does, right? And I hear for the last 20 something years, since I've been in this space, I hear from people like, I got this amazing idea for a book. I just never got around to it. I never sat down. I never had the time, whatever it may be. So now you can just take this idea, any nonfiction book you want, and you just basically type the idea in, and AI, through our system, we ask a certain number of poignant questions based on the kind of information you put in, kind of book you want to generate. And all of this creates certain prompts, and we do a lot of stuff on the back end. And the end result is a fully written, full-size nonfiction book. So you just basically answer some questions, and within the do-it-yourself system that we have, within like an hour or so, you can have like your book written and ready to go, ready to publish. But we even updated that. We have this new program now where it literally takes you 2 minutes. That's all it takes on your part. 2 minutes, you put it in, we do the rest, and then you get a full book back. It's already published with all the distributors. It's on Amazon, Google, Apple, like everywhere. So that's what AI can do. I guess it's a combination of AI and the technology, the programming, our knowledge of the publishing industry to be able to put all of this together. So people ask me like, well, aren't you with all AI stuff, aren't you concerned that somebody else will just do the same thing? Well, no, I'm not, because I put 20 years of book publishing experience in there. Plus, I'm a professional programmer, and that's what I do. I create, I code, and putting all those three things together, we're able to build this system.
Does it still go through at least a final or an editing process or a proofread to make sure that?
Yeah. The client, the author is usually the one that does the final proofread. And then, or if we're doing the audiobook, we'll listen to the audiobook and do the proofing of the audio. And then if we pick up some redundancies, because it's one thing that AI does, sometimes it's redundant, and it just like, they already talked about this, so we've removed that. So there is a little bit of editing, but really, if you don't do any editing, your book is still going to be far better off than the average book that the average new author writes. And that's just like mind blowing and very upsetting to a lot of people too.
I think that when it comes to content creation, we hold it very dear to us because it's our content, right? So we don't want to think that a computer or some type of program, or I don't like the word artificial intelligence. I like augmented intelligence. I think it's a better display of the word that it can actually do better than we can because we're so personally attached to it. But it sounds like it's what you end up getting though is you get to the end result more quickly. And to a point, I wish this had been around years ago. I've been writing a book for 15 years. So if I had, had the resources for this, it definitely would have saved a lot of steps. And I wouldn't be sitting there going, am I ever going to publish that book? Am I ever going to get that to fruition? It could have happened by now.
Yeah. Yours is the typical story. It really is. People have been publishing books for years, or writing a book for years and not publishing it. I'm still working on it. I got a couple chapters down. It's just a long process. And it's usually one of those things that ends up on the back burner. It's not on top of people's list.
And it's one of those things that, let's face it, writing a book is work. I think there's a population of people who believe that I'll just wait for the right moment to be inspired. And then that'll just, the book writing heavens will open and everything will be great. But in the traditional book writing sense, no, you schedule time to write, and you do that for as long as you're supposed to. Anyways, from what I understand, I had a book writing coach years ago who explained that to me, and she said, yeah, even the folks like Stephen King, it's work, it's a job. that's what you do. So it sounds like this makes the process easier, especially for those of us who are business owners. We're not necessarily writers to begin with. A lot of us are not writers.
Right.
We're business owners. We have ideas. We have things that we want to express. We don't necessarily know the right way to express them. This at least allows us to have a chance of getting our messaging out there very efficiently. What are some of the challenges, though, that you run up against in the AI space? What are some of the pushbacks?
Well, people don't like the idea, as we talked about it, as you mentioned, people don't like the idea of being replaced. Mm-hmm. And writing is one of those things where people feel it's extremely personal and it's something that they really want to do. It's not something that they want AI to do for them. And they take it extremely personally. And it's funny too, because when I place ads, sometimes I'll put an ad on Facebook regarding this, and like nasty comments and hates and, the hate emoji, because people just don't like it. I mean, let me rephrase that. Some people just don't like it. Other people will see the value in it and see how much it could help them, and they will love it. But there are definitely some people who just absolutely hate it. And that's the challenge. And it's sort of like when I was trying to sell people on the internet, this concept of the internet back in 1994, when I started my first web hosting company, I'd have to tell people what the internet was and tell them why they needed it. And it's new technology. They were afraid of it. They didn't understand it. Therefore, they didn't like it. And that was my challenge. I had to try to get people to want just to be positive of the internet in general. And that's kind of how I feel where I am right now. I'm selling AI a lot more than I'm selling BookBud.ai. And that's the nature of things right now.
That's a very good parallel. Thinking back to, 1994, we barely had computers in college. I studied radio broadcasting, and I think we had one or two computers for the studios, but then we had a computer lab. A computer lab with 8 or 10 computers in it, 9-pin dot matrix printer that everyone printed their assignments out on. Took 86 hours to print anyways. Sure. You're right. That's just what it was like back then. On the information superhighway, nobody would have thought, or those who had some forward thinking didn't realize how far that was going to go with information. I would never have thought back in the early 90s that there would be a day where I wouldn't need a wall full or a shelf full of encyclopedias, because I grew up with them, right? As did sure. You, I'm assuming. And now your encyclopedia now is pretty much on your phone that you carry in your pocket, but it's in your computer. So I can see the trepidation around AI, and I'm not seeing it replacing people. We run up against it too in the podcasting space, because people automatically think that, well, AI, are you concerned it's going to replace you? And I'm like, well, no, it's going to enhance what we do, and we'll be able to do more of it and do it better than we do. And our production team is already doing that. We don't have any services yet that click a button and it does it for you, but I'm sure that day will come. We're still in a world, though, where people will invest in, if they want to, they'll invest in a handmade or partly made product, a person-made product. The auto industry still has vehicles, not mainstream ones, but vehicles that a lot of them are assembled by humans, not machines. And there are other examples of that too. So cabinet makers still exist, because your, large furniture warehouses that everything's basically assembled by a machine or a robot isn't of the same quality that what some people want. So, but the AI discussion, I know it opens a can of worms. How is AI changing our world, though? What's your perspective?
Well, in the broader sense, it is doing a lot of the work that we typically have to do that we don't want to do, which is a really good thing. And I don't think people see that. They tend to gloss over the benefits and just look at the potential downside, like, ooh, it's going to take my job. But really, that's what's going on right now. It's doing some of the stuff that we just don't want to do. We don't need to do. It's so much better for us, for human beings. We are creative creatures. We're smart. We have this level of intelligence. Let's use it, right? And let's let AI take care of all of these mundane tasks that we typically spend a lot of our day doing. So I think first of all, and by you, I mean the general you, if we as people embrace AI, that's the first step. You have to embrace it. And then you'll be able to use it to your advantage. And once you could do that, then you're going to be ahead of everybody else who is basically fearful of it or doesn't want to use it. So it really is changing us in that those of us who are using it can focus on more important things. I can't even tell you how much more productive I have been since I've been adopting AI, because all of those things on my to-do list that I just never got to, now I could finally get to. It's so many mundane things. Like, I'll give you just one example. We had a book description writing service where I would basically write the description of the book. So I'd have to get somebody's book and I wouldn't read the whole thing. And this was not that I'm scamming anybody. I told them, like, you don't have to read the whole book, but you basically, I read the foreword, the front section, the first chapter, and I kind of peruse the rest of the book enough to really get a sense of how to write a good marketable book description for it. So this whole thing took about maybe like 2 or 3 hours, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. And now AI does that for us in like literally 6 seconds. I mean, it's crazy. And then you're going to say, okay, well, it probably doesn't do as good. No, it does a much better job than I ever did. Why? Because it reads the entire book. I mean, you just upload the PDF, it'll read the whole thing, it'll get a full understanding of the book. And you just have to give it the right prompts. You have to tell it what you want precisely and what it's for. And it'll write a description, it'll do the formatting. And again, it takes like seconds as opposed to hours. And now that's something that I don't have to do. And yes, I don't charge as much money for it anymore. In fact, it's a free service we offer. But it's just things that I kind of had to do that I really didn't want to do, but it was kind of part of the business. So I think that if everybody kind of looks for those type of things that they could pass off to AI and then put their time and their energy into something more productive, something hopefully that's more financially productive for them, then that would be great. And that's what you need to start thinking about.
I think that's a really good example too, is it's a time saver. It's not a job eliminator. It allows you to do different things. It allows you to redefine your services. Well, it's funny as you're talking about the time it would take to previously to do that. I can remember working in radio and editing on reel-to-reel tape. Now it's digital. Well, even beyond digital, because there are AI tools that can do a lot of the work for you as well, or at least make the editing process easier. We still do.
Sure.
We still use some high-end editing programs and tools too, to make sure everything is exactly the way we want it. But I can't imagine going back to editing on reel-to-reel tape to try and do the job that now is done in a fraction of the time, because I don't have to stop the recorder, cut, pull out a piece of editing tape, make sure it's stuck together, back the tape up, play it, make sure it sounds right. It's just the process is way, way simpler. And I can see that too with writing, and certainly with content creation in general. What are some quick tips for people who are maybe trying out AI and they're not successful with it? What are some of the tips that you can suggest to them as far as finding those? And I can't recall the exact terminology you use, but the things that you tell AI to do. I think that's one of the hangups that some people have is I'm trying that, but I'm not getting the results I want. Right. What are some tips to help people on their journey?
So the term is called prompt engineering.
Thank you.
That is going to be a big term in the future.
You mean like internet is now a big term?
Sort of, yeah. It's sort of like, I guess, some job associated with the internet. But a prompt engineer is basically a human, as of now, that knows how to communicate with the machine. And that's what it's all about. There's still this middleman, if you will. And the middleman is the text and the communication, or even the verbal, the speech that instructs AI, artificial intelligence, to give some desired outcome. So you need to know what that is, and you need to know how to talk to it. So it is sort of like a language, and people will think, well, yeah, it understands English. It understands any language, basically. So you just talk to it like you talk to a human. That's ideally how AI is supposed to become, right? You're supposed to be able to talk to it like a human, and it should understand you as a human. However, it's not, I don't know if it's ever going to be there, or maybe I should say that it's only going to get as good as human language. And what I mean by that is, even today, we've all been speaking for however long we've been alive, minus a few years, and we're still notoriously bad communicators. We don't exactly communicate what we mean, and we misinterpret people. There are cognitive biases involved, logical fallacies. There's a lot of communication missteps that basically takes what's in my head, and the message that ends up in your head is not the same. There's a lot of distortion there. So when you're talking to a computer, like via computer programming, there's like this filtration process, which is the computer language, where you can tell it exactly. It's like a common language, and there's no misunderstanding. So like when I'm programming and something goes wrong, I don't say, oh, it misunderstood me. I say, oh, I screwed up, right? I screwed up the code. And this is really important because there's that common code. And when we have like prompt engineering, if you can effectively figure out the code, like how to communicate with AI correctly, then that's the middleman in a sense. You can tell it to do exactly what you mean, exactly what you're looking for. And this is a little bit tricky because there's no like book that you could buy on like how exactly ChatGPT understands, like what is the code? It doesn't work that way. It's still human language and its prompts, but getting around to your question, like how could people get better at this? And that is start researching prompt engineering. There are books on prompt engineering. There are websites on it. There's like the top 10 prompts. And this is basically a lot of trial and error right now. It's people understanding how to talk to different LLMs, the large language models. So like ChatGPT may have different set of prompts than the other ones out there. The point is that they all have different ones. So which large language model are you going to be using? Like Claude is the other one that I use a lot. And then look up and do some research on prompt engineering for that and start to learn it. And then you could start playing around with it, and then you could start to teach it, and you can through trial and error get it to do exactly what you want it to do. And that's essentially what I did with BookBud.ai, like with the book publishing industry. After so much trial and error, I know exactly what to tell it to get exactly what I want back. And for the common person, this is a lot of work that they're probably not going to deal with, and they don't have to. They could just come to us if they want like a book written.
This sounds similar to, just as you were talking there, how individuals will do a search on the internet on a search.
Yeah.
If you're not putting in the right information, you'll get some very interesting search results.
Yeah, sure.
So it's about putting in the right information. And I know obviously it's a little bit more in depth, but I like your suggestion of actually doing your due diligence, doing some homework and researching the best way to go about asking the questions or inputting the information that the artificial or augmented intelligence needs to be able to give you the result that you're looking for.
Yep.
Philosophical question then. AI, your friend or your foe?
Your friend. It should be your friend. But I think a lot of people kind of see it as the friend who's doing extremely well and very successful, and they don't like it for that reason. Or the friend that they don't know very well and they're afraid of. So I think, again, you need to get to know it a little bit, play around with it, and see how it can be your friend in many ways. Let's address the big scary monster in the closet. Like, will AI turn on us and launch nuclear war or somehow empty our bank accounts or do something nefarious like that? It's extremely doubtful, because think of artificial intelligence like intelligence. We have smart people who are good and smart people who are bad, right? We do good things and do bad things. And there's always this balance within humanity of like hackers. You have hackers trying to like rip off old ladies. And then you have ethical hackers who fight that and who leave traps for them and who expose them. And that's the way it is. And that's the way it's always been, predating computer stuff. So when we're talking about artificial intelligence, you're going to have people who use it ethically and people who use it unethically. And so far in history, the ethical people have been winning. Call me the positive thinker, but I really am the optimist, but I tend to believe that humanity is a lot more good than we are bad. and the good will prevail. So we're not going to get an AI that's going to destroy humanity.
I think we should save that for Hollywood, or a throwback to iRobot. I think
Makes great movies. Makes wonderful movies. Yeah,
exactly. 100%. But to your point, it can do what it's told to do. So if somebody tells it to do that, then maybe, but what are the odds?
The question is, will it progress to have wants and desires? Because right now, we don't think artificial intelligence has wants or desires. It, like you said, it just does what we tell it to do. But what if it does get to the point where it does start having desires? What kind of desires and wants will it have? And that's why I think, like, if you do have some kind of artificial intelligence that develops these evil desires, I think somewhere in the world, we're going to have this artificial intelligence that has ethical desires. And maybe, and again, it's going to be this fight or whatever. I don't know, not a fight, but more of like a struggle, like a constant struggle between hackers and ethical hackers and scammers and scam baiters and so forth.
Like you said, that's been around for years, right? It's not like it's anything new. And as far as technology or evolution in industry, that's been around too. I'm assuming, those people who make buggy whips probably aren't that busy anymore than they were, say, maybe 150 or 200 years ago, because we don't typically drive horse and buggy in mass quantities like we did back then.
Yeah, it's a whole idea of not worrying about things that you can't control. And that's another huge aspect of it. I mean, maybe this is just a philosophy. It's just, again, a way of thinking. But yeah, why worry about it? There's nothing that I could do about it. Like if let's say that I did believe that artificial intelligence was going to evolve and kill everybody. If I really believed that, I'd be worried, I'd be losing sleep, I'd be panicking. And maybe I could start a website or a social media account and attract, a few thousand people. But that's the extent of what I could do. It's not going anywhere. You're not, it's just not. So don't worry about it. And if it does happen and kills us all one day, then I was wrong and too bad. But again, there's nothing we could do. We might as well live a good life until that point.
I think that's a great place to shift the conversation a little bit. So friend, I like that. Yeah. And I agree, because I think at a bird's eye view, it's like, oh, well, there's a lot of trepidation. But when you actually start to dig in a little bit deeper and not just look at it and listen to the rhetoric, because a lot of the rhetoric that you're seeing in social media or even in conventional media, it is based on fear or based on a single or not too many opinions. When you break it down, it really has the ability, as you've said, you're a prime example. You're a business owner and you're very effective, more effective than you were as a business owner who helps people in the publishing space be more effective, serve more clients, make more money as a result of having some fantastic, tools and AI at your disposal that you've created. What would you like to share with people? Do you have any resources that you'd like to pass on to individuals to assist them either, with learning more about what you do in publishing or something that will help them in the AI space? What would you like to pass along?
I could definitely help people who are interested in using artificial intelligence for book publishing, whether it's finishing a book that they started to write or just starting from scratch or just publishing literally a book a day, like a new book and starting a publishing empire. We have people who have done that. So if you are interested in that, just check out my website. It's called bookbud.ai. And we have a full course, an online course with videos where you could really educate yourself and see how it works. And you could try out, get your hands wet, feet wet, whatever you want to get wet. Give it a shot, see how it works for you. And if you like it, keep doing it. And if you don't.
Just don't get the AI wet, because then it might turn on you. No,
it might.
You never know. Bo Bennett, it's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for being my guest today. Before I turn you loose to go publish 86 more books in the next 86 minutes, or to help somebody get into the publishing space like myself, who's been trying to do it for the last almost 20 years, I'll leave you with the final thought.
Final thought is something we've already mentioned, and that is to embrace AI. I think that's so important, to embrace it. Don't be afraid of it. It's not going anywhere. And the more you embrace it, the more you learn about it, the less you'll fear it, and the more you will profit from it.
All right, great place to leave it. Bo Bennett, thank you for being my guest today.
All right, thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. Special thanks to our producer and production lead, Dom Carrillo, our music guru, Nathan Simon, and the person who works the arms, all of our arms actually, my trusty assistant, Stephanie Gafour. If you like what you heard today, leave us a comment and a review, and be sure to share it with your friends. If you don't like what you heard, please share it with your enemies. Oh, and if you have a suggestion of someone who you think would make an amazing guest on the show, let us know about it. Drop us an email, askcarl@carlspeaks.ca. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. You'll find all those links in the show notes. And if you're ready to take the plunge and join the over 3 million people who have said yes to podcasting, let's have a conversation. We'll show you the simplest way to get into the podcasting space because after all, we're podcast solutions made simple. We'll catch you next time.